You saw it. You felt it. You noticed it. You questioned it. And then you talked yourself out of it. The red flag, the hesitation, the tension in your body, the thing in you that knew something was off before your mind was ready to admit it. And now, you're not just dealing with what happened. You're dealing with what it did to your trust in yourself. Today, we're talking about how you trust yourself again after ignoring your own red flags. All right, y'all. Welcome back, family, to Movement According to Purpose, the podcast where we align our lives, our decisions, and our leadership with purpose. I'm your host, Q, and today we're talking about a specific kind of disappointment. The kind that doesn't just hurt because of what someone else did, but because somewhere in the middle of it, you abandoned what you knew. And for a lot of people, that's the deepest wound. Not just betrayal, self-betrayal. The pain of realizing the signs were there and you kept negotiating with what your spirit already knew. I'm going to take you out of church a little bit. So today, we're going to talk about why ignoring red flags damages self-trust. Why self-betrayal hurts deeper than disappointment. And how to rebuild trust in your own discernment without becoming hardened. By the end of this episode, you'll stop punishing yourself for what you missed and start rebuilding trust with what you know now. Let's get it. So let's start here, family. What hurt was not just what happened. Let me repeat that again. What hurt was not just what happened. What hurt is the part of you that knew. Maybe not fully, maybe not clearly, maybe not with enough evidence to explain it, but just enough to feel it, enough to pause, enough to question, enough to notice the inconsistency. And still, you stayed. You rationalized, you overextended, you explained away what your body was trying to warn you about. That's the part that lingers. Because now the pain is not just, they hurt me. It's, why didn't I listen to myself? And that question can be brutal because it turns pain inward. Now the wound is no longer just about what happened. It becomes your trust in your own discernment, your own judgment, your own instincts, your own ability to protect yourself. That's why self-betrayal often cuts deeper than disappointment. Disappointment says, that hurt. Self-betrayal says, I knew better and abandoned myself anyway. Man, y'all, that is a different kind of grief. Not just grief over what happened. Grief over the version of you that kept overriding what it knew to keep the peace, hold the connection, or avoid the truth. And healing starts when you stop reducing that moment to foolishness and start understanding what made self-abandonment feel necessary in the first place. You know, I got questions for y'all. Where in your life have you been angry at yourself? For a moment that actually needs compassion and honesty. I'm going to ask y'all again. Where in your life have you been angry at yourself for a moment that actually needs compassion and honesty? That is where healing begins. Because once you understand the wound, you can start understanding why you ignored what you felt. All right, family, here we go. This is the part most people skip. They shame themselves for ignoring the red flag. but never asked why they felt the need to. And that matters because most people do not override themselves for no reason. They override themselves for survival. Sometimes you ignored the red flag because you wanted it to work. Sometimes because being chosen felt more urgent than being safe. Ooh. Can I repeat that? Sometimes you ignored the red flag because you wanted it to work. Sometimes because being chosen felt more urgent than being safe. Sometimes because hope was louder than truth. Sometimes because you were taught to tolerate what made you uncomfortable if it meant preserving connection. Sometimes you called it patience, sometimes grace, and other times loyalty. But in reality, it was self-abandonment dressed in noble language. Listen, y'all, that's not condemnation. That's clarity. Because until you understand what you were protecting, you will keep repeating the same override in different forms. Maybe you were protecting the hope of what it could become, the comfort of being wanted, the fear of starting over, the belief that asking for more would cost you connection. That is deeper work, not just noticing the red flag, understanding what in you was willing to negotiate with it. Because discernment is not just about recognizing what is off. It is also about understanding what in you is vulnerable to overriding what you know. Let me ask y'all something. What were you protecting when you ignored what you felt? Answer that honestly, and the pattern gets clearer. And once the pattern becomes clear, you can rebuild trust without becoming guarded against everything. All right, y'all. I know we've been getting deep in the bag today. I know we have. We've been talking about a lot of stuff that's probably causing you to pause and reflect. But here's the good news. Rebuilding self-trust does not require perfection. It requires responsiveness. You do not rebuild trust by promising yourself you will never miss a red flag again. That's not realistic. You rebuild trust by responding faster when something feels off. That is the rebuild. And you know, y'all, I got some steps on how to rebuild. So here we go. Step 1, stop expecting certainty before action. Discernment is often quiet, subtle, incomplete. You do not need full proof to honor discomfort. And if we had time, I'd take you through the story of David and how David was chosen and the discernment of Samuel and all that stuff. But, you know, we're not going to get into Bible stories today, but we may do so in the future because discernment is a real thing. And it is often quiet, subtle, incomplete. And you don't need full proof to honor discomfort. Step 2, trust your body sooner. Pay attention to tension, confusion, exhaustion, the need to over-explain what should feel simple. Your body often notices misalignment before your mind names it. I'm going to repeat that. And I'm going to say it a little bit slower. Your body often notices misalignment before your mind names it. Step 3, respond to what you notice faster. Ask the question sooner. Set the boundary earlier. Pause before overcommitting. Stop overriding the first signal. Step 4, measure trust by how quickly you return to yourself. Not by whether you missed it, by how quickly you stop abandoning what you know. That is what self-trust looks like. Not perfect discernment, faster self-return. That is how trust is rebuilt. All right, family, it's time to bring this home. You do not need to punish yourself for what you missed. You do need to understand what made you override yourself and commit to returning faster next time. Remember this. What hurt most was not just the disappointment. It was the self-betrayal. You did not ignore the red flag for no reason. And self-trust is rebuilt by responding faster, not perfectly. Now, sometimes, yes, take your time, but don't overthink. I always like to say, pray before you panic. You do not need to become hard to become wiser. You do not need to become guarded to become discerning. You just need to stop abandoning what you already know. Now, if this episode gave you language to something you've been carrying, I want you to share it with someone rebuilding trust in themselves. Subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, send this to someone learning how to trust what they feel without needing permission. And this week, here comes your homework. Ask yourself, where do I need to stop overriding what I know and start honoring it sooner? Start there. Because next episode, we're going to be talking about how to stop confusing attention with alignment. And if you've ever mistaken being chosen for being well placed, that conversation is for you. All right, y'all, this is Movement According to Purpose, where we don't just talk about purpose, we live it. It's been your host, Q. It's always been a pleasure. Peace, love, joy. Until next time.